How do you, or what have you learned about the nature of driving corporate change? Novell's been a turnaround. We're seeing lots of mature industries responding in radical ways to this. Any lessons from the last few years?
Well, a number. I think the first is that people don't like change.
Unfortunately.
And it's true in all of these situations. Yeah. So when a business challenge, which is what the internet is for most companies, shows up, it requires leadership from the CEO and from the senior executives in the company. There are many different ways to address the challenge. Pricing changes, infrastructure changes, putting things online, doing partnerships, doing mergers, all those kinds of things. But companies that ignore this do so at great peril. There's no question that the availability of commonly fully disclosed prices, fully disclosed product information, customers have more power online. They can say bad things about you to more people and good things about you to more people than they can in physical space. So those changes are very, very real. Every customer I've talked with is not only well aware of what I just said, but has teams within their company trying today to sort out how they change their business model to tackle it. They start with an online service, an online store. They worry about their brand being eliminated or disintermediated by an intermediate brand. Some people, when they say, well, I bought it from Yahoo, and they say, well, that's the brand as opposed to the product, or I bought it from Amazon when the brand was someone else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of concerns about that in business, and people are beginning to respond. The hardest problem is getting people to act quickly enough and take the risks that they've not had to do in their traditional business.
Some people argue, and in fact it's stylish these days to argue, that the only way that a mature enterprise really takes seriously the mandate that you've just articulated is to set up an enterprise at a distance. If you're General Motors, it's a Saturn. Spin it out, .com it, IPO it. You and other corporate leaders, I think as we start to look around the landscape, we see a lot of people making change without having sent a bunch of people off to the hinterland, but actually have made the change, reoriented a company, in Novell's case, to make it internet-centric in effect, and have done that right in the mothership. Where does the right answer lie on this?
It's ultimately a leadership issue. I believe that all of these models work well enough. I think that all of the models that you described are change models. The benefit of doing a turnaround is the company's hit the wall. You've got everyone's attention on day one because they know things are screwed up. In many ways, it's harder to change a culture which is doing so well because people don't want to move away from their traditional model. But if there's anything that I've learned watching these changes, is that you need to act ahead of the wall. You have to see it, you have to debate it, and that's, I think, ultimately the test of successful leaders in any business.
But you're saying, in effect, that a successful leader in that case has to say, look, I know the crisis would give me a mandate, and the crisis happens when we slam into the wall. But what I need to do is create a mandate, and that's, in effect, the essence of the leadership intervention before we hit it.
Well, I think that the easiest way to express it is that CEOs and their staffs need to run scared. Because when you hit the wall, usually you lose your opportunity to fix it. Usually a new guy comes in, a new woman comes in to lead it. And so the fact of the matter is that these wall opportunities to show up pretty fast now. And we're seeing this now in so many different businesses. And people get confused. People are very focused on, for example, the fact that there's unfair competition between people who have access to cheap capital, say internet startups, and traditional companies. We call them the .bams as opposed to .coms, the .bricks and mortars, right? The .bams, and they are playing in a different space. Yeah. Well, 10 years ago, we complained that the Japanese had access to cheap capital because their interest rates were so low. And yet the American model ultimately did quite well in certain segments. So my point is that you can focus obsessively on the wrong things. This is really a leadership issue. When you're running a business, your customers depend on you. They expect you to help lead them into this new position. If you're not doing that, you're not doing your job.
And to that extent, the fact that you're describing a bunch of your clients, your customer companies dealing with this real-time access to customers, they're not just saying, I exist. They're commenting on you. They're buying from you. They're empowered with information. Your point is that it puts the traditional cannibalization issues that often cause corporate paralysis in quite a different perspective, which is you've got a market essentially telling you to run north, not south. And if you don't respond, it's at your peril.
Well, and again, I hate to say it, but these are all the standard things that you hear about involving leadership.
Yeah.
You have to understand what your customers want. You have to understand how the technology will affect that. Many people have been surprised by the changes. Let's imagine, for example, the changes from direct car buying will do on the car distribution industry. And yet it's all out there. Just read the press. Now come up with a strategy to address it. Either partner with it or compete with it. But the point is, the only thing you can't do is wait.
People talk about the challenge of managing on internet time these days. In a sense, you've been living in it for the last 2 decades. How do you do that? How do you keep up with this when, in fact, it is truly, for a company like Novell, the underlying capabilities of technology that you plot strategy on top of are indeed constantly in flux?
Partly the way you solve this problem is you bring in people who have seen the future and you listen to them. Find the smart people in the company who are not being listened to and listen to them. Because often they're the ones who will be the beachheads. The fact of the matter is that this is such an intense market that there's no way you as an individual, no matter how smart you are, can really follow all of it. But in any reasonable sized company, you can find the 10 people who can cover the entire space and they can become your advisors. In my experience, what you'll be surprised to discover is they're not your staff. They're typically in remote corners of the company, and you're not quite sure why they're there, but they are, in fact, the most important allies you can have because they are your scouts. They are they are the people you send ahead. And it's very, very important in technology to have people who live in the future and can tell you and paint a picture for you so that you can then act based on their model that they propose.
Let me ask the obvious question. These are people in different departments, multiple levels, I assume.
Sure.
Where do you find them? I mean, or put it differently, how do you find them?
Well, there's actually there's actually a very simple answer, which is find one.
But they tend to have fellow travelers.
And ask them who the others are. And in my experience, in the companies that I've worked in, there's always a set of people who are, in fact, linked together in very informal ways. But if you ask for a meeting, they'll all show up, and you'll have a great time.
But would I be wrong to think that these are potentially subversives? They are bomb throwers? They are radicals? They are people who,
in fact,
who might be rejected by the dominant culture of the corporation?
And in fact, that is typically how they perceive themselves, but they stay in the company. And in many cases, those people are now beginning to think about leaving to form these new companies because they're not being listened to. And it is a crying shame for companies that have established and trained these folks to lose their talents to a new player.
Let me ask you one last question. As a veteran of the technology space, somebody who makes his living by getting out ahead of technology trends, what is the next big thing?
Well, I look forward to a world where everyone is connected all the time. And I try to think about what happens to me and how I live my life when I'm always interconnected, when I can immediately reach anyone, when I can do a transaction with anyone, as long as it's in digital bits, which is most things these days. Video and audio and contracts and data and so forth and so on. And I try to live that life personally today to try to model how it goes forward. And when there are things which I can't find, I wonder, why isn't that available here? So it seems to me that for the next 5 years, the killer app, if there is one, is taking all of the technologies that we've grown up with, whether it's voicemail or desktop computers or the Office suite and so forth, and putting them in the net on broadband services. If you look at where the venture industry is, that's where all of their investments are now. And it looks like that's going to be a huge explosion. The core use of that network is communication and relationships. It's electronic mail. It's what's called instant messaging.
Yes.
And it's called chat rooms and message boards. More than half of the use of the net is those categories. And so that appears to be the center of what people will be doing. Funny thing, in this new medium, we're going to be interacting and communicating just like we do in all the other ones.
One of the very few things that remains consistent and strong from the physical world to the virtual world.
It's important to remember that some things don't change at the speed of light, and one is the physical nature of who we are and the biology of us.
Fascinating. Eric Schmidt, thank you very much for talking with us.
Good. Thank you very much.